up, y'all? So I'm Chris. I'm going to show you guys how to make some professional molds or clean molds. I know there's a lot of videos like this out there, but mainly what I want to focus on I'm going to be doing a couple of these. We're going to start it off with a flat mold, but the main purpose of these videos is not just to show you my method, but to explain that there's multiple methods of doing things, there's cheaper methods of doing things. So mainly what we're going to focus on is do's, but also the don'ts of the whole process. With that, you'll have the knowledge and a proper recipe that if you're starting out to delve into mold making, you won't have any of the issues. I mean, I have multiple years of playing around with products, materials, and all that stuff. So basically, you follow the recipe, we cover all the do's and don'ts, and you know exactly your thing's gonna come out correctly, your mold's gonna work, and you're not gonna waste any money. Okay, so what we're gonna be doing today is I did a little sculpture for us, okay, for this demonstration. So we're gonna be doing flat molds, right? So I want to do for the next one, I want to do block molds. Block molds are pretty much a flat silicone mold, but it's a bigger variant and we need to cut them open. Today for flat molds, it would basically be your normal flat molds for like jewelry and things. That is just your flat silicone piece lying down and you can pour in resin, easy go, pull it out, fill it up to level and you're done. So the general things, if you guys have 3D printers, will be 3D prints. So this is not an actual 3D print. This is a casted piece. But remember, when you're doing 3D prints, think about finishing of them, sand them so they don't actually look like a 3D print. If you don't care, that's fine. You know, just think about finishing. If not, it doesn't matter. But 3D prints will be a general thing. Then we would move into some of you guys that's on the artistic side, you like your sculpting vibes, like myself, you'll do a sculpture. Sculptures is very nice because I mean it's very controlled. You're gonna create your own thing like I've done here. It's on the board, I sculpted it to the board, it's flat, it's down, it's glued on, it's ready to go to make a mold off of it. So hopefully you guys get into your sculpting. If not, that's fine too. Then we're probably gonna move into another thing that's gonna be one of the bigger things, is organic things. So with organic things we have some issues. That basically with organic stuff you got things like rot to think about when you're molding these guys. If they end up rotting inside of a mold, it's gonna be horrible and you're gonna have to clean it, and sometimes it stains the mold. So just be aware of that if you're doing organic stuff, and if you'll actually be able to get it out of the mold, that's quite important. So also with things like, you'd go plants rotting, and then you'd go with things like anything organic usually has a lot of texture. It will also grab silicone very, very hectically. So think about release agents and applying them properly. Definitely applying them properly. But then again, today's video is about flat molds, where this actually won't be flat molded. This will be a block mold, as they call it. But because of undercuts, it's not the best idea to actually flat mold these guys, as you're going to have some issues actually getting it out of a mold. So we'll also discuss undercuts a bit more carrying on. So next thing will probably be the bulk of what you guys are going to end up molding is real things. Things that already exist, or are plastics, metals, stones, jewelry, anything that's like a rigid material basically, or plastics or any of that. So it will be, I actually have some of my projects here. These are some of my sculptures, little scullots that I made out of resin and stuff. So basically again, we sit with that same thing of the undercuts basically. So anything going underneath here won't be able to come out, that can't lift up. So like I said, we want to work with 90s that they can just release from the mold easily. With plastic stuff, real stuff, metal stuff, release is still important, but bearing in mind there's different releases you can use. My recommendation is go for wherever you're buying your silicones or your mold making products. Ask them for a professional release. It's generally the best thing you can use. It just has a minimal amount of effect on whatever you're using it on. So when working with clay things like the piece we're going to work with today, if you're using your Chavants, your monster clays, things like that, you want to avoid Like if I were to put petroleum jelly or weird release agents or anything like PVAs or waxy stuff over this clay, just remember with your more expensive clays, you're probably going to want to reuse it. So lathering it in a lot of stuff is going to make it like mess out a bit, and you're going to end up with your sculpting material pretty much being destroyed. So using professional release agents, you usually avoid that issue quite a lot. So with these guys, you want to release them, but you're working with something that's less likely for the silicone to bond to it, whatever silicone you're using. Just again, be aware, if you look at this, bad undercuts, especially on the inside here, you're gonna have a bad time just trying to pour this solid. So next, let's go into release agents. There's a couple of things you can use. You can use your petroleum jellies, and then you can thin them out with some additives. You can use cooking things like your spray, cooking stuff for baking trays and stuff like that, like your spray cooks and things like that can be used. They're generally very greasy and buttery and tend to make the whole process a bit unsettling or unpleasing, in my opinion. Use the professional stuff. It's not as oily, it's not as greasy, it goes on nicely, especially your aerosols. You can use painted stuff, but again, be aware when you're using painted stuff, they could damage the finish, or you could end up with brush strokes over whatever you're molding. And if you're going for a smooth surface or something on your piece, that will actually translate into your final mold. So just be aware of things like that. So let's move into actually creating the wall of your piece, which would be your next step. Now we have our clay piece sorted, like that. So then it's gonna depend how professionally you wanna work. If you actually wanna do, it's generally safe to go a centimeter. I don't know, we're gonna have to, sorry, all the American people, we're gonna work with centimeters. You're going to want to go 1 centimeter all around the piece for your spacing, for your flat surface that's going to bond to your piece of wood. Right, so when you're going to be doing your wall for your piece, that's actually going to contain the silicone. So what I've done is I've actually just grabbed a 10 millimeter drill bit, i.e. a centimeter. So what you could actually do is you place this guy, the centimeter, you can mark it. So this is if you want to be really accurate with your silicone usage. I mean, this isn't a big piece, so you're not going to waste a lot, but for some people, like if you're doing a lot of little silicone pieces, you kind of want to make sure you obviously use the least amount required. That just saves money, and I mean, you don't have to have it too big. I mean, there's no need for a surface being, you know, overly big or wasting excessive amounts of silicone if it's not necessary. So what we just do is we just quickly mark it. If you're a bit anal about it and you want to have a nice neat mold, depends what you're building your wall with. You can sometimes just use a container, shove the container around and pour. If you don't care, that's fine. I mean, we all have our days where we don't really care and we just want to mold something. Then shove a container around it, glue gun it down, and you know, you're sorted. We actually have a little grid or guide, and then you can just follow this and bam, and that should be quite a little accurate representation. I just did this quickly, I don't want to waste you guys' time, so we're just gonna go boom, and then we just follow our line, and that should be around a centimeter over the piece, capturing it. And now we have a line to build our wall onto. Also, you have like a plasticine clay, but this is just like a normal modeling putty that you'd find, or like Play-Doh, I guess. So baby powder, use some of this, just releases or just causes a bit of less friction when trying to actually remove the pieces that you rolled off of the board. Just a little bit, don't go too crazy with this, otherwise you're gonna mess up all your clay and it's not actually gonna bond to itself anymore. Pop that down. I have some spacers. These are 10mm threaded bar, and I just use it as a little spacer just to get an even thickness when rolling. You basically just roll some clay out. You obviously don't have to use any spacers. If you're not keen and you just want to roll out a regular uneven piece of clay, not really going to make a difference. It all depends on basically how you want your end mold to look. And there we go, should be fine. Boom, and then all we do is we can chop this up. there you go. Now you got a nice little chunk of clay rolled out to make a wall. Acetate. So just ignore that you can't see the lines on this very clean cutting board of mine. But then this, I marked out some purple lines. It's difficult to see right now, but I'm just gonna cut it on there. So this clear like plastic is very nice to use for building walls. It's a little bit more labor intensive, but if you're gonna want to shoot what you're doing, this is a good option to go. Or if you just want to have visibility and sight of what you're pouring, you know, this is it's a very good route that you can constantly monitor what you're doing when you're actually pouring your silicone. Don't cut yourself, blades hurt. Alright, so, okay, let me show you guys. If you were going the clay route, right, then you would see, you can now just use this, manipulate it, follow the lines, and basically place it down on your piece. When using clay, just remember wherever these two pieces are going to marry and join, it's quite important to actually just pay attention to sealing properly when working with clay. It's going to be your biggest headache, is just making sure nothing leaks. If you're using guys like this modeling putty and stuff, I do recommend it, but just watch out, you know, chemicals aren't great for the respiratory system. So if you're keen, if you have it, if you put a little bit of benzene at the bottom with a brush, that will actually take off some of the baby powder and stuff from the rolling process, and this will actually stick down a lot better. So, and when you're done building, try and use a tool, either the tool you're using that's a cutting tool or whatever you want to use, and just push that down to avoid leakage. So you're just going to pop some of that clay down and just get it down as you move around your sculptural piece or whatever you're molding. You just want to keep that down. Keep joining everything, is just to avoid any leakage happening. Okay, but for today we're using shim. We won't be using, when you're doing the shim, you're gonna want to start somewhere, just pick a point and pretty much start laying it down. So let's go from this side. Here I'm just using CA glue. Just bear in mind, the main purpose of using the CA opposed to glue gun is glue gun melts the crap out of acetate. So you're going to end up with very janky walls that don't work too well. I use the CA glue or just normal super glue. I have a bit of accelerator here. Just pop some of that on just to get it in place and set it down. Let that harden up. And then from there you can actually just start manipulating your piece, gluing down each corner and just move along. I actually just do little tags instead of trying to CA the whole wall or the whole bottom to seal it. I'll show you guys. We're just going to seal that with alternative medium that's not super glue. Just to make sure we don't have no leaks, because leaks is bad. Okay, cool. So now our shim is down, right? So now what we're gonna do is, let's quickly cut our little excess piece. The flusher, you can get your two pieces here and like have less of the excess floating around bothering you. The better you can have a seal. So what I like to use is this. It's called aluminium tape. They use it for ventilation in buildings, but this stuff is quite amazing when you're actually making molds. It's pretty much foil with glue on it. If we're going to be honest with each other, it's pretty much just foil with glue on it, which is quite cool for a lot of things. That up there, get it down on the first side. Then I actually end up liking using the sculpting tools or whatever you're using, just a little bit of a tool to help you guide. Just level that out, pop that down. then kind of just like foil, you can just work it. You can shape that. Cool. Cut off the excess. Now because this piece got tagged, we are gonna use some petroleum jelly and just seal it up. You can use a couple of different things. You can also use a little piece of clay and roll it into like a worm. You can pop that around to do a little seal. I found that if done properly, Vaseline does the job too. Just want to have it sealed. Cool. So now once we got our little wall around, just make sure it's all sealed like we did with the Vaseline. And then what I do is I take just a piece of the Play-Doh or plasticine clay, whatever you want to use, break it in half again, and then you end up making little legs. This is quite a nice little method that I've just started doing, and it really helps, especially if you're making a mold or you've already made a mold that's not made on a flat surface. This will actually help you to level out your piece as you're pouring. So while you're pouring, you can adjust the angles of the piece to make sure it's filled to level. But then when we're pouring and we're starting out, just check this out and get it level from the start, because then it's always easier working with it from there. Another little helpful tip, always try and push on all four corners at the same time, otherwise you get like this weird wobbling going on. Let's keep pushing that. Cool, it's looking good. Side. Just try and push all of those. Just basically you just move around. Remember to check all axes, so move around the whole piece, check each axis, make sure it's all level. Another little helpful tip, always make sure this is clean. If your surface of your level isn't clean, it's obviously gonna throw off your measurements. And then again, make sure that the base of the boards are clean where you're putting it down, so there's no like residue from glue guns or things like that to impede just getting a nice level going. Cool, we're good. Yeah. Cool. So last thing is what I always recommend is right before you pour silicone, just double check your level. As you can see, it's slightly off again. So just always do a double check, level check right before pouring your silicone in, just to make sure everything's still good. Especially if you're brushing or maybe touching the board, it can get whacked slightly. So now we look good. Was a little bit off. Oh, that seems fine. Cool. So I mixed up a little bit of Mold Max 30 by Smooth On. I generally like this. This is usually the staple tin cure silicone that I end up using for a lot of things. You obviously will change a little bit of or you would pick your silicone according to what you're planning on molding, and then next would be in what you're casting. Some resins tend to not like to set in tin cure silicones like Mold Max. Also, you will have certain things like, obviously platinum silicone won't set in tin cure silicone, but there are some casting materials that just don't like the tin cure, and it will force your hand in going for platinum silicone. With this stuff, the most important thing is any discoloration. So usually your silicone before adding the catalyst will be white. When pouring, you do not want to have white streaks. As you can see there, those white streaks are bad. Do not have white streaks. When pouring your silicone, there's a high probability that that will be uncatalyzed or never set, and that is one of the other big issues that's going to cause your mold to not be correct or not even work at all. So always be aware, always scrape the sides thoroughly. When mixing, mix as long as you can, obviously bearing in mind the times, and when mixing, always scratch that bottom. Another tip, get that tongue depressed at an angle in that corner, scratch that corner. Just go around and scratch that corner clear. Scratch the bottom. Make sure everywhere where the container is touching silicone has been scratched clean or scraped clean. And remember to do one good final mix. The next step will actually be, because I have the machines, I'm gonna degas this. The degassing, what it does is you have a chamber, you put the silicone in, and a pump sucks out the air. That causes these bubbles to rise in volume about 4 times to 5 times, depending on the material being degassed. That will rise up, form bubbles, and then drop back down. As soon as it's dropped back down, you see all the little bubbles popping. Give it a couple of seconds and then you would break your vacuum. If you don't have a degasser, it's fine. We're gonna discuss how to actually pour when you don't have a degasser. Okay. So we're gonna brush. I'm gonna show you guys this method. I would be fine pouring this, also because I have a compressor. If you don't and you don't have the technology, get yourself a brush. Just remember, try and get a brush with as soft as possible bristles, especially if you're doing sculpts. If you push too hard, you can actually mess up your detail. So if it's not clay or anything soft, you don't really got to worry about the bristles of the brush. But generally it's better to use a softer brush, especially if you spend a lot of time sanding your master and smoothing it out to get a beautiful finish. So, some people just pour all over the piece if they're gonna brush it. I don't really like doing that. I tend to want to focus on an area that's less detailed, get some silicone in the mold, and then pretty much like dip and drag from there, if that makes sense. So let's just take that. Cool. Get that going. You also, another helpful tip, you never want to dry brush. So get your brush nice and wet with silicone and then you just move that around. My main, if there would be an issue for me or something to take caution with, it'd probably be the face, the little holes in the teeth. You want to just try and get that rubber or that silicone in there and all the little cavities that might create bubbles. We'll go into undercuts a bit more on the next video that I'm gonna release soon, and in that I'll actually explain to you guys how to spot undercuts, how to mitigate basically getting bubbles in them, and then we'll also discuss a little bit of like the liquid dynamics of silicone and just how the stuff moves, because the better you understand how the liquid moves at the end of the day, the more control you have over it. Get that in all the details. So if you don't have any technology as in compressors or degassers, this is now degassed, but as soon as you're gonna brush, you basically destroying what the degasser did, because as soon as you touch degassed silicone with spatulas, with brushes, all of that, you adding micro bubbles back into the medium. So generally like a degasser is perfect if you're gonna degass and just straight pour. It basically keeps any air bubbles out. You just do your thin little pour and you're sorted. Okay, so for those just brushing, take a little bit of care with your brush, you know, go around the whole piece. I'm not gonna do that right now. Let's get pouring. This guy, I generally like to use acetone. I guess it would depend what silicone you're using. Benzene also works. But for me, the best cleaning method's acetone. You're gonna wanna wring this out. You can't just pop it in there. If you just pop it in the acetone, it's gonna go hard. So clean properly and rinse a couple of times. Okay, so for the pour, you wanna again focus on a spot that's less detailed. And focus, always pour thin stream. This is quite important for those of you that don't have compressors, that don't have degassers. Your main way to fight bubbles is a nice thin stream. Pour as far away from your piece, or if you have to pour directly on top of your piece because of your mold, just try and focus it on the least detailed or spot with undercuts, if that makes sense. So you want to just focus it in one location, let the silicone do its thing and move through the whole mold. And what you can do, if you have a compressor, I'll actually show you guys. If you didn't want to brush and you have your compressor on hand, I have mine right here, then you can actually just make sure that you have no bubbles. Don't use too much air pressure. You can actually add bubbles if you're going too hard with your compressor. So you just want to move it around. And as you can see, if you're looking at the face now, you can actually notice that silicone out of the detail. With that way, it captures a nice skin layer of silicone that's going to make sure that you don't actually get bubbles entrapped in there. So if you don't want to brush, put it in some silicone, let it run over. Don't fill it all the way, and then you just do your little blow, blow, blow with your compressor. Also be sure to drain these guys. Most silicones do not like moisture. So just a little added tip. If you end up blowing, you don't maintain your compressors, you get uncatalyzed silicone, you probably got some moisture in there. Okay, so that's the jam. You just want to get the surface detail bubbles out. Fill it up. Right. So again, just remember your thin stream high up with the bucket. Your best chance to, as it drops from the container and it pulls that thin stream, it actually elongates the bubbles to the point where they pop. So that's quite a nice way to just, without any technology, just a bit of pouring skill, you avoid getting any of the massive bubbles. It'll sometimes pop micro bubbles, but it's just gonna take care of your massive bubbles. Any other little bubbles like these lying that you see around on your surface of your silicone will rise up as the level of the silicone increases. So don't worry too much about them. And once the mold's actually full, you got all of your clay covered, you can actually move around and pour everywhere, it doesn't matter then. You just want to get everything covered, let all of that rise up, and then you can just hit it with a compressor or a hairdryer and pop those top bubbles. If you're a perfectionist and you want it beautiful. If you don't care, doesn't matter too much, you can always go with that. Cool. So now, I want to show you guys something. I specifically did a smaller mix for this. I'm going to show you guys how to scrape a bucket. So if you have a little bit left that you want to get inside your mold, bear in mind again, spatula, brush, anything added can create bubbles again, because now you're messing with your degassing. Just place it in a corner and just slowly drag it to your midsection. Lift it up, pull it away. You don't want to scrape too much, you don't want to give too much movement, too much potential for bubbles being created. Pull it, drag it, let it drip out, do your thin pour. Get all of that in there. Do a little bit of a scratch. Just leave my spatula in and let it run. So also, if you're adding all of the silicone in the container and you're scratching the container, just make sure your mixing is done really well. This is something you can do if you're mixing your silicone properly. If you're new to it, I'd say rather just mix a little bit more, leave the last bit in the bucket, and then you know it's a safety thing. And with molding stuff, you kind of want to err on the side of rather safe than sorry, as sorry involves a lot more work and money, so you don't want that. Once it's filled up all the way and you got it nice and full, what you can do if you have it while it's still in its working time, you can do a little bit of a blow to pop any surface bubbles. And just to make sure all the surface bubbles are gone. The thing of bubbles on the surface don't really matter. I mean, as long as it's not on our detail, that's the important part. But with regards to doing resin casting, and when these molds go into a pressure pot, you really want to make sure that there's no bubbles, because the pressure pots actually end up destroying any bubbles that's also entrapped in the silicone, especially if the pressure pots go really high, up to 60 psi's or that. They can actually, and have actually, with things I've done, destroyed the detail layer of my molds, because there was bubbles entrapped just behind the detail layer. The bubbles popped, went through the detail and destroyed my detail and destroyed my mold completely. Then patience is important, guys. Please read your data sheets, and if the manufacturer says it takes 24 hours or 12 hours to set, please don't touch it. You know we all want to touch it, we're all impatient. Don't touch, especially if you want it to come out nice and flat and smooth. If you've leveled your board, you want it smooth and flat. Don't touch, and don't demold before the recommended time. It's there for a reason by smart guys who made the product. So just follow the times, and also make sure to double check on the heat at which the times are calculated. That is quite important. Alright, so now next day, and our silicone seams set. Like I said, always give the appropriate time that's recommended on your data sheets. Don't try and rush it. Don't poke it until it's set. Alright, no poking, no touching. And if you want to see how good your mixing is going, you peel this out. You'll see there's still some white, but you can actually feel if there's any residue. It's pretty much just to see how good you mixed, or to track your mixing. If your container comes out clear, there's no residue, you know you're doing it right. So then to take this off, like I said, if you're going the super glue route, just remember that it's gonna mess up the board you're gluing on. I mean, the super glue, unless you have things like some of the cyanoacrylate companies do have the uncures that actually dissolve super glue. If you have one of those, that's perfect. But in general, it's probably gonna stay behind on the board. It's actually coming off quite nice. I take that back. I just want to get the wall away. Cool. So that's happiness. Okay, there's a couple of options. You can obviously do blades, scissors, but something I've actually seen from some of the people doing resin stuff, or people selling molds, which actually works really nicely, is get yourself a little cuticle trimmer, I believe is what these are. So these actually work the cleanest out of everything out there. Blades work, scissors work, it all depends on you, what you want to use, you know, whether you care or not. Sometimes I just cut it with a blade or scissors, you know, it doesn't always matter, but let's do it the right way, or the nicest way. And I have to admit, these guys do give the cleanest cut. Just be aware, if you really care about having it flat, you always want to take off, there's quite a little lip here, the liquid lip that's created. So try and take your cuts a bit more in to the mold, to just try and get your surface area of your mold as flat as possible. Grab that. My little cuticle trimmer is not great. It's had a rough life, guys. go. We do this little part where we glued it down. And then you just basically check that everything's nice and flush. Then when you're demolding, start from a point you have. If you know your piece that you're demolding, start from a point that you know will be the least likely to grab to the silicone. Put some pressure down on the silicone, and then you're just gonna slowly start wiggling it loose and releasing it. Got some Vaseline on my hands.
Everybody shake it, baby.
Let's see. It came out nice. Just keep pushing it down. Oh. Like I said, some damage is to be expected. There we go.
Everybody shake it, baby.
Hi guys. So, that seems good. Alright, let's clean this up and get casting. Alright, so what I've done is you can clean these guys with chemicals. Just be careful when cleaning your silicones with chemicals, as some of them will actually not dissolve but start disintegrating your silicone. So your benzenes and acetones are great to clean release agents off. I mean, benzene is made to clean oily substances, so it works great for release. Just be careful, as I said, you want to keep it minimal. Don't have too much wet liquid in the mold. If you're putting it in, maybe get a brush, dip it in a cup, quickly brush it, and maybe tilt the mold upside down when you're brushing it, just so that the excess liquid drips out, doesn't stay inside the mold and start eating it. So clean the mold. Then what I did is I used the release spray. I released, and then I did a little bit of a brushing for the pizzazz. So in later videos when we discuss casting, we'll go into intrinsic painting and brushing methods and the different kind of things you can do with brushings. This is just for the fanciness. If you guys want to know more, then stay tuned, subscribe, and check out some more of the videos that's going to come. So let's get mixing. What we're also going to do with this one is we're actually going to add a magnet. So I'm just going to add a magnet, and I have little magnets attached to the magnet to just be able to place it inside the mold. So let's get mixing. Alright guys, so I did a little black here. I love this stuff. I get it from our local supplier. It's called F160. I think so I get it from our local guys, AMT. It's made by, I think, Axon is the company that makes the product. It's just a polyurethane plastic. I like this stuff. I've always worked with this stuff. It's quick setting. It's quite nice. It's got good strength. And yeah, I love it. I've even made molds with it. It's a really nice thing to work with, I have to say. Let's just get that mixed up. Again, whenever you're mixing, always make sure to scrape the sides, scrape the bottoms. But be aware of your working time of your products. Like this stuff is really quick, so we want to get it in fast. And again, when pouring, go slow. If you're scared, you can brush in your detail, but we're just going to pour that in slowly. Let that run in everywhere.
Everybody shake it, baby.
All the little gaps. Be careful not to overfill. I'll show you guys what to do if you end up overfilling it. We're gonna stop there, and now we're gonna place our magneto. And just get that nice in the middle. See where we have some space. With magnets, when you guys add magnets, I'm actually gonna take out a little bit. So let me show you guys quickly. So this is what we're gonna do now. Because the magnet makes it bulge, you know, displacement, that old friend, we're going to take some of that off, lessen the amount inside, and if you can, try and get your cast a little bit more accurate, because now we're going to have some cleanup to do. This is the first one, so forgive me, but then we just take off some of the liquid to compensate for the displacement that's going to take place. We need a little bit more in there. Okay, so what I wanted to say with magnets is you can have your magnets inside of your product. Just be aware that it's gonna decrease the effectivity of your magnet. So if you actually end up putting the plastic over this, you can, but it will decrease the effectiveness of your magnet and how much strength it's actually got when it's trying to grab onto a surface. So you can encapsulate it. It's better if you don't. Cool. So this is set up now, so let's see what we have. Alright. There we go. So with this now, you can have fun, you have your molds, and now you just gotta keep making stuff and enjoy the process. And yeah, hopefully this has helped you. And yeah, definitely if you want to go check it out, go give my page. So my business account is Strange Chemical FX on Instagram, and then my other one, my personal account for me as an artist, and the one this video will be linked to, will be Chris Lestrange. And yeah, check it out and keep following me, and we're just gonna keep making some really cool stuff. Cool. So yeah, leave a comment and a like if you enjoy this. If you want, share it with somebody who's maybe interested in starting to make stuff. I'll have links to the Instagrams and my Patreon in the description. And yeah, I hope you guys like this. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, comments, likes are all welcome. And enjoy making things and being creative. Cheers.